to our workshop today, Transgender Inclusion and Advocacy. I'm going to do an introduction for a few minutes, about 10 minutes or so, and then Johanna is ready for a very informative, enlightening talk that we are all going to learn so much from. She'll be taking over the spot I'm in right now in a moment, and then when she finishes, we will open it up for questions and answers from all of you. So whatever questions you have, please hold them and know that we will make sure to make time for those at the end. So I'm Bridget Sampson. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. I am the very proud mom of Jackie Thornhill, who is an amazing, brilliant woman who happens to be transgender. And so it's really through her that I've learned so much about what that means and what it doesn't mean and how we can be supportive of transgender people in our lives. So that's what really brings me here today. But I also bring to the experience my background as a communication professor, retired communication professor, and communication consultant, trainer, and coach. So I'm trying to bring all of that together. I wanted to let you know briefly that Jackie and I are starting to create digital courses to educate people about what it means to be transgender and how to be supportive. And those will be for family, education, and business. And please look out for more information about those. Our school will be called Transgender School. And so just to start off, before I introduce Johanna, which we're all very excited about today, who's right here. So, and she can see you all, so you can wave to Johanna. We have two screens. So she's gonna come on in just a minute. I know she's the big star of the show, as she should be. And I hope, how many of you got to watch her film, her documentary, Becoming Johanna? I hope that you enjoyed that. That's actually how I came to meet Johanna. After I saw the film and cried through it, I wanted to get to know her, and I wanted to invite her to come and speak and do screenings at Cal State Northridge, where I was teaching. And so we were lucky to have her do that. And that was 3 years ago or so. And we've continued our relationship as friends, and I've learned so much from her, and I'm so grateful to her. So a little bit about what I want to share before I introduce Johanna. I want to share my family story very briefly, and you'll get a lot more of that in the courses we're going to be doing in the future, and you can get a lot more of it in the articles that I shared with you in the invitation. And then I want to just give a couple of communication recommendations, because for those of you, all of you, which is why you're here, who want to know how to be supportive, especially in your communication choices, there are some really important basics to know. So I want to share a few of those before I turn it over to Johanna. So my story is that when Jackie was born, we were incorrect about what her gender was. And we learned her actual gender, her true gender, as a female when she was 19, when she told us that, and when she expressed that she is a woman. And that was 3.5 years ago. And it's been the most amazing journey since then, learning what that means and who she is, and the courage and the bravery and the work that it took for her to transition to be her true self, socially, physically, in all of the ways that one does that in a society that largely still does not understand this experience. I have since learned that many people are transgender. It depends on the study you look at. I saw one study recently that said at least 1.4 million adults in the US identify as transgender. What I can tell you is that in my local support group, we have 2,000 families that are members, just in a local support group, who have transgender kids in their family, 2,000. So many people are saying, what's happening? And why are, there's so many more transgender people? Well, there aren't so many more transgender people. It's just thankfully becoming slightly safer for transgender people to come out, as my daughter did. And so this is an education that we all need desperately. And what I've learned in the last 3.5 years, I now want nothing more than to share it with others so that we can understand and be supportive. And so when Jackie came out, I thought that I knew some things and came to learn that I was completely clueless, and educated myself. Let me tell you some of the things that are most important to know around communication. Please do not say transgendered. I hear that a lot. The word is transgender. Someone is transgender. Think about the meaning of like adding ED to a word, like you're transgendered. It sounds as if it just does not feel right, and it doesn't normalize that some people are transgender and some people are cisgender. That's the way we say it. So you're either transgender or you're cisgender. I am cisgender. My daughter Jackie is transgender. And transgender also will certainly include someone who's assigned birth, let's say was male, but they identify as female and they are female, or someone who's assigned or designated birth was male, but they are actually female. Their gender is female and they identify as female. Transgender also includes people who are non-binary and don't identify with any gender. It's a spectrum. So there are many people who identify somewhere on the spectrum that I didn't even mention. So please be open to whatever an individual expresses to you that accurately describes their identification, okay? Sexual orientation and gender identity, two different things. Your gender identity is the gender that you identify as, okay? So my daughter identifies as female, and we learned that at 19 years old. So please be open to this coming out at any time. A big misunderstanding is that all people know when they're 3 or 4. And if you saw Johanna's film, you saw the story, which is some people's story of someone knowing very early, you know, and she talked about playing with Barbies and knowing that she was female. For my daughter, Jackie, that was not the case at all. Jackie hid the fact that she was or suppressed the fact that she was transgender by being hyper masculine and doing all the very stereotypical masculine things, baseball and cars and dating, you know, girls and all the things that males are supposed to do. And at 19, it all came crashing down when she really came to terms with the fact that she is actually female and shared that with us. And in our support group, many more people have that story than the story of someone realizing they're young, because many people come out in puberty, after puberty, when they really realize that they're not in the body, that they're not in the right gender for what their body is turning into in adulthood. So please use transgender and cisgender. Please do not say transgendered. Please do not use someone's former name unless for some reason they give you permission. It is in some cases known as a dead name. Some people like the term dead name. Some people don't like the term dead name. My daughter Jackie absolutely uses it, and we do not speak her dead name ever when she's present and when she's not present. We always call her Jackie. When Neil, my husband, and I talk about Jackie when she was 1 or 2 or 3, it's always she and it's always Jackie, no matter whether she's there or not. And many friends, I know this is a big question because all my friends have said, but when you talk about her when she was a bit, no, she's always been Jackie. She's always been she. We just didn't know until she was 19. So please, please honor that with transgender people. Don't ask them their dead name. It can be incredibly triggering. Don't ever use it. Don't ever ask them to say it. And Jackie's had countless experiences of people asking her to do this. And that's not necessarily true for every trans person. Some transgender people are fine with you saying their dead name. So please don't generalize or stereotype either. Just like I shared with Johanna, knowing very young, and my daughter Jackie coming out at 19, right? Gender dysphoria is the distress a person feels due to the mismatch between their gender identity and their sex designated at birth. That's straight off the internet, you can tell. But if you hear someone talk about gender dysphoria, that's what it is. And it can be incredibly distressing. And for some people, it's mildly distressing or barely distressing. And for some, it's very. Some transgender people want surgery, some do not. Please do not ask about this unless you have an incredibly close relationship with the person and know for sure that that's appropriate. Also, the issue of passing. Some transgender people are interested in passing as their true gender identification. Some people are not as interested in passing as their true gender. They're fine with people knowing that they're transgender. So please honor this as well. For every different transgender person, just like every human being on the planet, there are different ways of identifying, self-identifying, different requests, different ways of being and expressing ourselves. Please don't expect a transgender person to perform and act out the stereotypical gender expectations for their gender. For instance, Jackie is not into like dresses and high heels or any of the things that we stereotypically think about females. That doesn't mean she's any less female, because you know cisgender women who are not into those things either, right? Whereas Johanna, you know, is very into fashion, and you know, she's more into that sort of thing. And you know, it's just different for each individual person. Please see that the same way you would with any other form of human diversity. And if you want to know what being transgender is, that is all it is. It is a form of human diversity. That's it. So unfortunately, sadly, there are people out there who think it's a mental illness, who think it's a sin, who think it's all of these things that it's not. It's just like, some people have blue eyes, some people have brown eyes. Some people, for me, my gender identity in my brain matches my assigned biological sex. So that's true for me. That's not true for a transgender person. The sex of their body that was assigned at birth does not match the gender that they know they are in their brain. You know how you know what your gender is in your mind, in your brain. You just know, you just feel you are that gender. It may match your assigned sex and it may not. There is no morality to this. It is not a choice. Hear me. It is not a choice. In fact, the choice to come out and let the world know this in a world that is so unkind and unfriendly to this experience is incredibly courageous and brave. And I know you're here because you see it that way as well. So there's so much more to say, and I could go on and on, but I really am excited to introduce you to Johanna, who I just want to thank for teaching me so much in my journey. Johanna has been my friend since very early on in the beginning, and she has been incredibly open and willing to share with me the things that I needed to learn that were harder for Jackie and I to talk about. You know, that sometimes mother-daughter relationships can be complicated, right? So Jackie and I have come a long way and grown together. But Johanna and I have shared so many deep, meaningful conversations where she's taught me so much about her journey and what it means to be a transgender woman. And I could never, ever thank her enough for that. And she is an educator. She is just officially Johanna Clearwater's trans Latinx advocate who does a tremendous amount of speaking and teaching and educating and helping people and supporting the transgender community in more ways than I could begin to imagine. She's spoken at Duke and USC, and just in programs that she and I have organized together, twice at CSUN, one for the whole campus where hundreds of people came, and she stayed for hours and answered questions and supported everyone who needed support at that amazing event. So I just can't thank her enough for the work she does in the world. I hope you got to see her documentary. I also want to acknowledge Jonathan Skurnick. If you watched the documentary Becoming Johanna, I know that you learned from it, and I know that you loved it. So please, let's use our reactions and I'm going to just clap my hands if you can see them for Jonathan Skurnick. Please clap your hands, do your snaps, whatever you want to show us. If you're out there, Jonathan, you are brilliant. You are amazing. Your film has taught and is teaching so many of us. I saw it like 2 weeks after Jackie came out. I sobbed. I was still sobbing when I came up to you, Jonathan. I'm sure you remember after the film, and you told me about Johanna, and you said you can meet her and we can plan a screening with her. And I was like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, this is so, the being able to see 2 weeks in and being in shock and not understanding such a beautiful, articulate, brilliant transgender woman in this beautiful film created by Jonathan. It gave me the hope that I needed in that moment. It was at a PFLAG meeting, and I just can't thank you enough, and thank you for being here to support us. So I'm gonna turn it over to Johanna. She's ready. She's got a lot to teach you and share with you. I think I said enough in introduction to her. I could go on and on and on about how much I love her, and I hope that you learn a lot from her. She will be sharing really important information. I would take notes if you can. And I would also write down your questions that you would like to ask after Johanna finishes her part of the talk. So please show your hand claps, and whether it's your virtual hand clap or your actual hand clap. And here comes Johanna Clearwater.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And I want to essentially going to be talking about 3 types of advocacy today. One of them is individual advocacy, self-advocacy, as well as systems advocacy. I remember specifically talking about, hi, Jonathan. Hi, Deb. I believe one of my parents is on right now. This one's going to be specifically about them. When I was in high school, the first time I had I took the initiative of, starting my self-advocacy program was when I first came out. I think that's the first step I took in order to really, take that step and advocate what I needed as a teen. And I remember coming out, and unfortunately at the time, it didn't work out so well with Blood Family, but through that, I was able to connect with people that really supported me. And it got into individual advocacy, where I found really that it took a village to really raise me. And one of the parents I have that's on right now is Deb, and they essentially really supported me to get to where I am today. One of the many people, and they advocated on my behalf to the point where it led into system advocacy, where there's like things that were done in order to really support me in my journey and my identity and support that. And there was measures that they took in order to reflect who I am as a person on legal paperwork that at the time wasn't really, it wasn't a known policy, right? So there was a lot of policies and changes that needed to happen at the time that they really took the initiative and came up with a solution to really best support me. And honestly speaking, throughout different parts of my life, I found myself constantly having to take the moment to really advocate for myself and realize that I really need also allies that formulate some type of individual advocacy that support me as well in different areas, whether it's in the workspace or in relationships, you name it, it's all needed. And there's constantly change that needs to happen with systems that are in place and policies. And it really is up to an ally to really start coming up with solutions. Because and every trans identity, it's different. Everyone's going to need something a little different with what their needs are at the time. And I find it really important to really reach out to those that are can support us. I just wanted to touch base and give you some examples with some examples I experienced at work. I wasn't always, by the time I became an adult, I wasn't out, and I thought I wanted to live a stealth life. And it really affected me to the point where I couldn't figure out how to navigate these spaces, these cisnormative spaces, to the point that it started affecting me overall with my relationships with people and how I, navigated the world. One of my experiences that I remember having when I was working as a chef was I would go in and out of work and not really be able to, I was professionally growing with the skill set that I was there to do, but I wasn't professionally growing and connecting with people in the way that I feel is very important to have moving forward and becoming, older and an adult, to the point that once I switched over to a different job, it got to the point where I wasn't out. And I remember going to a grand opening for a nonprofit here in LA that is a trans-led organization. And I remember being filmed in the grand opening to the point where one of the employees that I used to work with, a coworker of mine, saw that segment on Telemundo. And I remember him calling me out and making me feel unsafe by saying, like, I know your truth. And it got to the point where it affected my work relationships. And the quickest thing I can come up with was, well, did I look good on camera? Whatever, right? Just to deflect with my insecurities and concerns and fears. And it got to the point where during the presidential election that was happening at that time, really, I was seeing other people's truth in the other side of the world and my realities that I face as a trans individual. And that experience essentially led me to never again try to live a stealth life. It's not for me. It's not for me. I'm not about it. And I decided to really start being out. And after that experience, I remember just being super out and about and honest from this get-go to my new employers at the time. And I was bartending and doing waitressing work and bottle service at a club and at a restaurant. And from that experience, it really, I was able to grow professionally in that sense when it comes down to feeling comfortable in my skin and also being out, and really realizing that if I'm honest with myself and honest with other people and, you know, put my best foot forward, I'm hopeful that someone's going to be supportive and understanding about my experience, but also be able to work with me and want me to be part of the team. And I found that I needed that in order to really emotionally grow. But it's a never ending story, right? It's like something that the world also has like the good and the bad in it when it comes down to how people perceive trans identities. And, you know, there's always many solutions that someone can come up with when it comes down to helping those people out and helping me out. And one of them is really just being supportive and being able to like communicate with me and not have microaggressions, because that's very much real in the community. And I am trying to navigate it constantly. It's a never ending story. So the best thing that you can do is just to be an advocate and speak up when there's policies and changes that are not there to really protect you or protect trans identities. So it's really up to everyone else to really start coming up with solutions to support and be an advocate. So when it comes to, I also remember during that time when I was working, I was in a certain part of my transition that I was pre-op. I'm very open with talking about my experience with surgeries. And one of the main reasons why I also had a hard time was because I wasn't physically comfortable with myself at the time. And that led to a number of issues in workspaces. And then I remember even after I had surgery, there was a whole nother level of issues that came about in that perspective, as far as like recovering time and what to do now as a post-op woman, and like how to like navigate those spaces, as far as if you're not aware, which I'm very few people are. When you have surgery, you essentially have to recover for a huge amount of time and you have to dilate. And it's very crucial that you do that in certain periods of time in order to maintain all of the above or below. And it's hard to go back to work immediately after having major surgery. So it's really important that workspaces and employers really understand that there's these challenges that certain people and in trans identities face, whether they're pre-op or post-op, they look different. And at the time, I remember when I had surgery, I thought I followed all the protocols and procedures when it comes to leaving and then coming back to work. But it turns out that there was something that was missing in that process and I wasn't able to go back to work. But once I got sorted out and I started working, there was these things I needed as a post-op woman. Like I needed extra time on my break in order to dilate midday and then go back to work that was needed. I needed a room in order to have access to like running water. So it's really important to meet trans identities where they're at and really listen to what their needs are for that moment in time in order to really professionally grow and like grow as a person. And I've taken steps that I thought I was going to go back to school, and that's for me. But there's a lot of things I'm open to, and that's what I realized, that I didn't really allow myself the opportunity to try different things as a pre-op woman. And now as a post-op woman, I'm able to really like navigate the world in a different space mentally, just because I feel complete and whole. And I realized that there's so many areas in life that I want to try, and little jobs here and there, and figure it out and give myself the opportunity to try different things out. And it's really important that I try this out. Is there any questions that anyone might have for me by any chance?
Actually, I'd like to ask a question. Can I ask you a question, Johanna?
Okay.
So how many of you again watched Becoming Johanna? So what we saw in that film was advocacy in the educational space, and Deb Smith was really an advocate for Johanna, and the educators at her former school were not, as we saw in the film. So I'm curious, Johanna, we have a few educators in the audience. We have some people, and, you know, I was wondering, in the school space, like in high school, you know, how did Deb advocate for you, and what did people do wrong and what did people do right to help support you when you were that young?
So the right thing that I had with the people that assisted me was that they were listening to me and my needs at the time. I just also remember that they were super patient. I was a kid who literally had no idea what love meant and what they wanted out of life outside of their own identity. And they were patient enough to really work with me and support me in any little endeavor I wanted to do. Although they didn't always like me probably at the time, I knew that they loved me, which is something that I'm still constantly learning. You can like someone and you can not like someone, but you can always like still have love for them. I'm constantly still pushing buttons and boundaries with all my loved ones and family. And although my relationship with blood family didn't work out, I still have a really big family outside of that.
What are you doing now? Which workspaces were more accepting and which weren't?
That's a really good question. I feel it's a really hard question to answer, just considering the fact that if me as now, like where I'm at now and doing the field that I was doing in the past, like working as a chef, I feel like it would be a completely different experience. And I am a lot more confident in myself and a lot more confident in the work I'm able to do and skill sets I have, that I would flourish in pretty much almost anything as long as I try it. But I did find that there's like good and bad with all the fields, because I also worked at a Hebrew Academy school where they're legally actually allowed to fire you for being trans because religion and state is a little separate. And I was working there for a bit, and I remember me and the HR manager who hired me was this queer woman at the time and Catholic. And she was really supportive, and everyone there in this institution was very loving and supportive, but there's still like certain guidelines and policies that they were allowed to do, even though you're a good employee and they like you. But I found that most of my jobs in the food and beverage industry have been relatively hit or miss. It just really depends on how I communicate and how I'm received and who's there and who's supportive and who's not. So I would say it's a 50-50. It's literally just Russian roulette sometimes.
Thank you. We have someone volunteering to come on and ask a question.
I'd like to ask something, but I just want to say that I have a cousin that identifies as transgender male. So I'm supporting him in his journey. So I'm learning a lot today about attending this fantastic Zoom meeting. So my question is, are there supports out there, like groups or advocacy groups that you can suggest so I could actually share to my cousin?
Yeah, are you, where are you located again? I'm sorry.
I'm in Westlake Village, California.
Westlake Village, California. There's a few programs that you can reach out to. I don't know what the age of your nephew is, but because I know each group that I know of, there's like an age gap. So how old are they?
Mid-20s.
Mid-20s. Okay, so I know CHLA program offers a support group, as well as there's support groups at TWC, which is a Trans Wellness Center, which is located in Koreatown.
Oh, okay.
And CHLA is located on Sunset, which is in Hollywood, I believe. And there's a few others.
I'll jump in here a little bit. Whoops. I'll jump in here too. PFLAG is great, which is Parents and Friends.
There's also
of lesbian and gay and bisexual people, or I probably got it wrong, but it's PFLAG, the acronym, and they're fantastic. You can just go to their website and they have meetings everywhere. Go ahead.
There's also a few other programs in Koreatown, all in the same space in the floor. I used to work for Trans Latina Coalition or Trans Latin Coalition, but there's a space, APAIT, that has, I believe, the SOUL program that's mainly geared towards trans masculine folks, as well as the Invisible Men program that's run by Lucky Fueler. That's also for trans masculine folks. And it's all in that same floor, on the same floor.
And I just want to say, I know a lot of people who are in the meeting right now are big activists and advocates. So please feel free to put anything in the chat. I really appreciate Nikki.
Right.
Thank you so much for putting PFLAG in there. Anybody, please put resources in the chat, and you all have the ability to save the chat as well. We'll put resources in there. And I also just want to mention again, it's not developed yet, but our website is going to be transgenderschool.org. Please write that down now. It'll be available within a month. Hopefully, we're designing it now, and we're going to have a list of resources. And we're also going to be on Facebook and Instagram with resources and lots available for you. And for families with kids who are transgender, our support group is Transforming Family. You can find the website at transformingfamily.org. And several of our members are here right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you know me personally, if you want to reach out to me about that. And we provide support for parents, caregivers, young adults, young kids, everyone, up to, pretty well into adulthood for the trans person themselves. So please let us know if you want more information. Anyone want to come on and ask a question? I think we have a couple hands raised. All right. Amy sent a message that she would like to ask a question live. Amy, are you out there? Can you unmute yourself and join in? Hi.
Hi. I'm Amy. My husband, Alex, we live in West LA, and we are the parents of an 8-year-old son. Oh, I cry every time I talk. Sorry. An 8-year-old son that is probably going to transition at some point. And sorry. So we're in the education, kind of getting educated on the topic. And we know that hormones are going to be a topic down the line, like puberty and all of that. And he currently identifies as male, but wears, has long hair and dresses. And when you ask him, he'll say, I'm a boy that likes to wear dresses. And he'll say, I'm gonna turn into a girl when I grow up. So that's kind of, where he's at right now. And we're just like, we love you no matter what, like we don't care. And so we're just, trying to get as much education as we can. And we're part of the Transforming Family email, so we get so we're good on that. We haven't watched a documentary, but we're definitely going to. The question that I have for Johanna is, when do you I guess decide for yourself when you meet somebody new if you're going to share your information, your status, or your background? And I just wonder, do you obviously don't share with everyone that you meet, but I get at certain work relationships or personal relationships, at some point you must decide when you trust enough in it to share, or how does that work?
So I want to just say that as far as when I was younger, I already knew my identity. It was just more of when I felt safe enough to say it. And what really helped me feel comfortable with coming out was honestly my friendships that I had when I was younger, and friends being supportive, because they were the first people that I had communicated to and said out loud my identity. And from there, what also helped me was when my blood parents got divorced and not having a toxic masculine man around my life, I felt a lot more comfortable disclosing it to my blood mother. Although there was a little blackmailing involved with my blood sister that pushed me to it. It happened, but I honestly, when I was pre-op and I was navigating the world a little differently, I remember I didn't always disclose to people, but I always had this deep down gut feeling of do they know? Do they not know? I was always constantly on defense and had all this anxiety based on my identity, because, the realities that trans people face are that we can get attacked, or as my own experience, family leaves. And so I'm constantly, going over my traumatic experiences when I was younger and kind of, trying to be whole again. But now as I navigate the life, I pretty much just assume everyone knows. I just walk in life feeling a lot more comfortable by thinking that everyone knows. That way, when it does come up, I'm like, well, it is what it is. There's no shame in my identity, which is, I think, what I was holding on to so much when I was younger. There was all this shame I had, even though I knew exactly who I was, and it was like, you know, going forward with my decision and like making these choices that were really going to get me to where I wanted to be with. There was still this deep down shame I had because I lost family and I lost all these parts of my life. But I ultimately found the people that were for me and support me and love me, that it outweighed the bad. Mm-hmm. I remember also thinking back and self-reflecting on my blood mother's experience, and she essentially signed her rights as a parent before I entered the foster care system, and she also signed the rights to me starting my transition. So in a weird way, as an adult, I interpreted that as like, here's my last move and this is what I can do for you. Hopefully you get the help that you need and you can start what you want to do. And I remember holding on to so much hate towards her because she left, but in the long run, it benefited me a lot better than if I would have stuck around and dealt with all these microaggressions. But I also want to touch base on, I believe, I'm not sure if you were the one who asked a question, I'm trying to go through it, but I saw someone talk about how do you manage losing a son and that experience. And in a weird way, you're losing the idea of what you had in mind for this kid, but you're gaining a daughter in the long run. You're still, your kid is still your kid, you know. You just being more aware of their identity is just the beautiful part of it. And you have this decision, and you know, yeah, you just have this, you're the parent and you got to love them unconditionally. I'm trying to word it very politically correct, but like, I'm just also like, love your kid. They want love, be patient. All they want is like your love, honestly. And I'm so happy that they feel comfortable and safe enough to communicate with you at such an early age. I think that's really powerful. And it also shows who you are as a parent. It shows how safe they feel around you and comfortable.
Yeah. So. And I can address that too, just quickly. You know, I'm 3.5 years into having Jackie come out, and I really didn't understand in the beginning, and I had a lot of distress and a lot of sadness, and I really did feel that way as if I were losing a son. And now I look at it so differently. I'm so proud of Jackie. I totally see her as my daughter, as a woman, as my greatest gift in life, my greatest teacher in life. Like, I've learned so much. I'm so proud of her for being herself and for all that she's taught me and for how close we are and how amazing she is. And so, but it took me time to get there. So it's okay if it takes time. We just say, and Jackie and I are trying to teach now, and Johanna too, like, please get support for yourself. If you're a parent, please don't make it harder on your child, because it's hard enough in this world right now to be transgender and to be brave and courageous enough to speak your truth and to transition. So as parents, we're really trying to help other parents understand, please get support for yourself, but please don't put that on your child. Being a parent is unconditional love. Your love should not be dependent on your child's gender or their coming out to become their true self. So I just want to add that, but we're going to be talking a lot more about that in what we teach moving forward. I was looking at chat. Poor Johanna's Johanna's trying to look at the questions, but I hope I got this right. Lauren has a question and wants to come on screen, and then Simon has a question and wants to go on screen, and that's the order that you've all been waiting. So we're going to go with Lauren and then Simon. And if you have to run at 12, we understand, but we will stay on longer to take people's questions. So Lauren, do you want to unmute?
I also wanted to say to Amy that just be kind to yourself too. This is a whole new experience for you as well. And I think that the nicer you are with yourself in this learning process, the easier it will be to come to a better place with you and your kid. So Lauren, I think Lauren's ready to ask a question. She's right there. She's good. Perfect.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, Johanna. My question is, well, first of all, they're very different. So I don't want to be, conflating two different things, but I know the pain of being mistaken for something that you're not, in a very different context. In other words, The person that I'm responded to when I'm shopping, when I'm driving, when I'm walking through a neighborhood because of my race is not the person that I am. I don't even know who that person is. That's something in people's minds. So it's very different. I'm not saying they're the same in any way, but I do know the pain of being mistaken in the world for something that you're not and being responded to that way all the time. It's extremely painful. And so my question, Johanna, is in your experience, have you seen maybe even over the past 5 years, whether there's been a shift or at least a change in people's awareness and consciousness? Because that's a pain that no human being should have to go through. None of us should have to experience that. And I'm just wondering whether or not you have noticed that there's at least a change toward a higher consciousness around transgender people in terms of understanding and compassion and empathy.
Right. I just want to say thank you for sharing. I think there's some commonalities with what you're saying. There's a lot of intersectionalities that I also face. I know right now I look blonde and maybe a little more white passing, but there's moments where I feel like there's definitely been a lot of changes that I've noticed dating wise specifically. I've seen a lot more conversations being brought up as far as also for work, as far as like in the entertainment industry, there's a lot more work in looking for trans actors or trans models. I mean, Imara Jones just got, I think, Calvin Klein a few months ago and is like the face of that right now. But there's a lot more opportunities, I would say, that definitely are more accessible now than they were 5 years ago. And I think one of the major ones is bathroom, specifically bathrooms here, and dating and jobs. There's a little more opportunities, but it doesn't mean that there's still not more room to improve. There's still a long way that we can go.
But we're headed in the right direction, sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds like we are, but I mean, we are and we aren't though. There's a lot of like backtracking, I think, as Americans, we're doing.
Yeah.
Sorry to political stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. Thank you for the question. And Simon wanted to ask the question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Now I look like a pilot. Okay. Johanna, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for sharing your experience with us. And I'm going to ask you a question that, feel free to educate me if my perspective is insensitive or off base in any way. Are you, in your day-to-day life, as you go around your neighborhood or shopping or whatever, do you think of yourself, are you able to think of yourself as a woman, or do you see yourself as a trans?
As a trans person, that's a really good question. I think for me personally, I've been on this ongoing journey of what it means to be trans and my identity. And I also see how problematic binary spectrums can be. So I'm constantly, to answer to first and foremost, I do feel I am femme. To answer your question very directly, I do see myself as femme, and I just assume people are going to view me as trans because I used to have this fear of like walking around thinking they don't know, people don't know. And I had all this anxiety based off of that. And I realized that wasn't doing me any good, and I wasn't really living. I was living in fear of, what could happen. But to answer you point blankly, I do feel I navigate the world as a femme, and I do get received and acknowledged as a woman. But I'm challenging the system by using they, them pronouns because I feel like there's a lot of problematic binary spectrums that I feel trans individuals face because of.
Thank you.
Would you define femme for us?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I guess high femme energy is what I would use, and that can look very differently for different people, right? But for me, I think of like hair, nails, like energy, a little more, it's kind of hard to describe, but just stereotypical female stuff. But I don't really like to use the word women as often, just because I found such a negative association with it now that I've gone through. So like my experience would never be that of a cisgender woman. And I think I realized when I was younger, I had this goal of mine to just pass. And that was my number one goal. And I realized how problematic it was in getting to that point, just because of the fact that there was a shame, essentially. There was a shame that I had in my own identity, that I somehow felt the need to assimilate and blend. Like that was, I mean, it was survival instinct, I'm sure of it, like deep down subconsciously. I'm constantly deconstructing my cisnormative ideologies. If that answers any of your questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Simon. I learned a lot from Johanna's answer, and I'm still learning in this process. So Esther has a question. Esther, come on and ask your question, please. Welcome.
I'm from East Coast, and I'm a school psychologist. And so I should know a whole lot of stuff when I'm helping my students and, you know, when they come for counseling and other stuff. However, that is not my dilemma because I'm a professional, so it's very easy to talk. But when I'm dealing with a relative whose daughter at age 19 came out and said that she is transgender, and they're doing all the right things which a parent and a grandparent needs to do as a loving family.
Okay.
But I also know that how much pain they are going through as a mother and as a grandmother, okay? And the question I have is that as parents are accepting the change and loving and caring, how a child who is 19 and older has understanding of emotions and social emotional aspect of all this transitioning, do they understand what parents are going through? Because they are going to make mistakes. The grandmother I'm talking about, unconsciously, she will use the word she instead of he in a conversation. And then she feels bad about it because she's going through transitioning herself to, you know, how to dress and what kind of right language she needs to use. And sometimes the dreams and weddings and, you know, all that, what parents think and grandparents. So how do you help young people who are transgender to understand the transitioning of a parent and a grandparent?
That's a really hard question to answer, just considering the fact that, I mean, I think child and parents relationship is perfect. I mean, we all like to challenge anyone who is our parent, I feel like, or we've all done so at some point of our lives. I feel like a lot of it's going to come down to making valid attempts to, you know, getting to know the trans individual as a parent, and also try to connect with them, right? Because I think we all need to communicate a little better. It's not a one-time fixed situation. It's work. You constantly have to, you know, put in the work to try to connect. And at some point, you would hope that it's going to click. Oh, this morning, the loss of whatever they hoped for me. But you also, I think as a parent, needs to understand that this individual has their own life to live, and you lived your life. This is who you are. That's who you are. But your child is completely separate, and you have no control over that individual. You can only be loving and supporting to this other person and set them up for good, and whatever that means. But in my perspective, in my experience, it took me a while to realize that, you know, my parent was mourning the loss of this person that they thought they were going to be raising, and, you know, all their hopes and dreams for that person is completely, it's just different in a sense. But I'm still me. I'm still the person that I am. I just physically look a little different that you would probably imagine. I don't know if that answers your question, Esther.
Yeah, yes, I just was, because I see the pain on both sides,
yeah.
Being a kind of an outsider, even though she's my relative, but I still not as deeply connected as the grandmother and a mother and a daughter who has now become son. The pain in those triangle I find, and as a professional, I help, as a relative, I can feel the pain. And that's what my question was about. But I understand.
Both experiences are valid, right? Both feelings are very valid, and it's important to acknowledge both of them. And hopefully, if that is communicated between the two of them, and they're open to hearing each other out, then hopefully they'll have that understanding that, you know, this, as a parent, I'm mourning the loss of this idea of you. And then as a trans individual, as your kid, I need this from you. This is what I need from you as a parent. But an outsider looking in your situation, you have this perfect opportunity to potentially address, you know, both sentiments and feelings, and really just you want to acknowledge the parents' feelings, but you also want to reinforce that this is a whole completely different person. You're not this person, and you want to be loving and supporting to this kid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Yeah, Esther, I don't know if you got the email invite, but please reach out to me if you didn't. I have articles on Medium about really to support parents and how to work through our, you know, the challenging time that we have sometimes in coming to love and accept and understand our child's transition. So please let me know if you would like to get the link to those articles. Maybe somebody could put a link in the chat if you have time. And Julie wanted to come on. Julie, you're up next.
Hi, good morning. One thing, I work in high school, and so I deal with a lot of different issues. But one of the things I do talk to parents about, and I also talk to the students about, is to allow the parents some time to get used to this new idea. Like, just like it took the student time to kind of come to grips with it and come to understanding and come to accepting themselves, the parent kind of needs that time to accept it too. The love should always be there, but trying to get your brain wrapped around all of that does take time. So I think there are some unrealistic expectations of parents that they're supposed to just jump on board, when I think they have a bunch of things that they need to get through as well.
Yeah, I very much agree with you in ways, in a lot of ways, but there's also, I think there's a difference between, for some individuals, like life and death situations, right? And like where they're at emotionally because of outside forces, outside of just family stuff, right? They don't feel supportive. I mean, there's a huge percentage of trans individuals they've thought about suicide. So although I agree with you, I also want to highlight that for some, it's just not that. Sometimes they, you know, they're hopeful that their parent's going to be their number one supporter. And that's what I would hope as a parent, it would just click. And that's not always the case, but I also want to, you know, like you're highlighting that from parents, I also want to highlight that from trans kids, it's coming of age, right? And coming to understanding, and they're navigating through their identity and social groups, and the world is not perfect. It's not in a place where they're, you know, people are loving and supporting. Although it's changed, there's still that reality. So
right. The population I work with is mostly Hispanic. Yeah. So that's a whole cultural thing, which goes in addition to everything else that these students are trying to deal with.
I have an example of a friend who, if you, like, how much time is acceptable, right? Like how much time is acceptable to wait for a parent to come around? I have a friend who, I'm not going to name names, but like this person has, you know, like put their relationship with their parents aside because they're connecting with their sibling, and their parents will still expect that my friend to go to church and like constantly like do prayers and constantly hope and that they will come back around, or constantly misgender them. And there's a level of acceptance that my friend has made in order to still maintain some level of relationship with their parents. And in my perspective, outside and looking in, I can't speak for that experience, but like to me that seems like a little it's hard. And I see the realities that my friend's facing, because it's hard to watch someone be misgender, and I know it hurts them so much. and it's causing them so much pain, but they're trying to constantly get validation from their parents and constantly trying to find love from them and feel that love, that they will accept whatever they get. And I personally couldn't do it.
Yeah, we have parents that tell their children that they need to find Jesus, and that's going to make them all better, you know. So
I mean, it's almost like ending for me personally, it felt like I needed to end a toxic relationship in that process, and that's what I felt was best for me. For my friend, they found whatever was best for them at that time. But I mean, those are examples that I can give. And so when you're highlighting the fact that some parents do need the time to mourn and loss, I agree with you, but I just hope that they take those steps they can get to the other side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I know Deb had a question about talking about religion and the role that plays in parents rejecting their children's identity when they come out. So I think we addressed that, but Deb, did you want to touch on that more? What do you think? Yeah.
I think she's touched. I mean, I think in that little dialogue right now with Kovacs that she covered some of that. I'm making an assumption that there could be people listening in that are also recognizing the experience of religion and how that plays into the parental aspect of accepting their children for who they are, because they have these deeply connected feelings about the Bible and what the Bible supposedly teaches us about who we can be and who we can't be. And so I know that Johanna, not only in her own life, but with some of her siblings have experienced similar issues. And so I think it's oftentimes forgotten that has a huge role in many families, and why there is so much difficulty in accepting, even in the gay community. It's just something that is there. So anyway, I think she covered it. And it's good to see you. Sorry.
That's my parent, everyone.
Aw. Thank you for being here, Deb. It's so good to see you. So we had another question for Johanna about, besides misgendering and dead naming, are there other common microaggressions?
I'm sorry, I need to read this question.
Just what common microaggressions?
So common microaggressions would be misgendering and then apologizing right after. That's one. Another one would be treating you like not your identity is another form. Constantly dead naming you would be another. Those are real microaggressions. There's also problematic language regarding overall the community as a whole can feel unsafe. And derogatory terms, the term tranny, although me and my friends have reclaimed that word for us and we use it, using those derogatory terms that's pretty, I wouldn't say those are microaggressions, those are really aggressions. It's really just a dialogue, I would say, as far as experiencing how you're being treated and not being validated with your identity is a big one.
Yeah, I would also add, just from having a lot of conversation with Jackie, is over focusing on it, asking tons of questions. And it's Jackie just wants to be seen as a person. She would much rather talk to you about politics and public policy and, the government. And so over focusing and making it being transgender is this, the most interesting thing it's the least interesting thing about someone. We're all so multifaceted, right? So over focusing on it, I think, is a significant micro or maybe even macro aggression, I would say.
Not all of us are, it's a lot of emotional labor that you'll be asking a lot of trans individuals to share their experience. And if they're not willing to do it, it can come off as a microaggression.
So there's a comment that maybe we can address. So if anybody else wants to come on to address, and I appreciate this from Edgar, for school psychologists and all school administrators and people who work with kids, they really have to face the challenge of possibly wanting to advocate for trans kids, yet they're restricted by maybe their school policy or legalities, and if the parents aren't supportive. Any ideas from you or from anyone in the group about navigating that?
That's, honestly speaking, it's going to have to come down with whatever you feel comfortable, just because there's, I would say, policies in place and also potential fear of getting sued, I think deep down you're going to make a decision whether or not what step you feel comfortable taking in order to support another trans individual or LGBTQ plus individual. I can't really tell you exactly what to do. I think deep down it's whatever you feel safe in doing. But I do want to just highlight the fact that I felt I didn't get all the help I needed for just one person. I got help from different friends or teachers or parents. I got different things from different people, and it kind of built into getting the help that I needed. But I remember having a teacher have their classroom open during lunch, and I would stay there and be there. But as far as like school goes, I think, you know, like directing them to services that they might like or need, but also not to overstep your toes, not to step on their toes either, right? Like if they're asking for help, but if they're not, sometimes you just gotta like let them know that like I'm here if you need anything, and that would leave a huge impact, because they would at least be able to acknowledge and know and hear you that you are a supporter and you will support them in any way that means to them.
I think what you just mentioned is so important, because I know I find myself, Cal State Northridge is a Hispanic serving institution and a minority serving institution. And so I realize that a lot of the students that are sitting in front of me come from the Catholic faith. And so just defaulting with intention to listening more than coaching and asking questions, which would be a stance I might take in other circumstances, has been really helpful, because then it's interesting to see which students come back again and again, like you were saying, like just having those available time to be listened to, where some of the judgments that might be felt elsewhere are set aside. And then being somebody, especially now in a virtual setting, as educators, I can communicate so much through Canvas as far as what I'm available to talk about, because I can, and I had a student specifically mention that the fact that I populated our Canvas classroom with the Student Health Center, the Counseling Center, the Pride Center, the Veterans Resource Center, the Dream Center, and the Oasis Wellness Center, they said, I know that those places exist on campus, but it was just nice to know that you know that they exist and that you gave us kind of shortcuts to each one. And I kind of highlighted what the purpose of each one is and the services that can be provided, because a lot of times students don't realize what's available on their campus setting until somebody helps connect those dots. But just by the nature of having them there, I think can speak to being somebody who's available for related conversations if someone's interested.
Right, and I think just going by what you said, I would say that these kids probably also realize when you addressed all those things that you are a supporter and you are a community, and they have a place that they can come back to and someone to talk to. And it's really important to highlight those people that are for you. I remember in Models of Pride, that was my experience, where I felt I'm going to this workshop in these spaces and trying to set up a conference for essentially kids like me. And there was a lot of empowering moments that I experienced through that, but also it was really nice seeing community with positions of power and see them flourish in that way. It really helps having someone who's visible in the community to really see where you could go as well. So thank you for sharing, Wendy.
We have a lot of educators and a lot of activists, so please feel free to chime in. We wanted to make sure to get all your questions first, but I'm not seeing any new questions unless I missed something. So please feel free to chime in with a contribution as well if you want to tell us about something that will be helpful. Okay, Nicole, before that, Nicole says she has a question about being an ally. Nicole, can you unmute and come on, and we'd love to hear your question if you're able to.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I run into people who feel that they're open if ignorant, and kind of expect people who they know who are transgender to explain it all for them, instead of going and looking things up online and I have trans and non-binary people in my family, so I end up in these conversations a lot, and see, this is the problem is that I don't know what the language I can use with these people, and their idea is their perspective is, how am I supposed to learn if they're not willing to teach me? And you know, I just want to slap them, but that doesn't get the necessary information across. And so I'm just wondering if what language to use, because I just get so frustrated I don't know what to say to them.
I mean, first and foremost, I would address it that you're essentially asking someone to do a lot of emotional labor and possibly relive traumas in order to educate you. So you're asking them to do free labor in order for you to learn. There's a lot of people on the internet that there's all this information that's out there, or there's workshops like this, or there's other workshops that, you know, are provided for free that they're able to learn from their experience without having to personally go into and ask, you know, a person, hey, or they could present in a way where, like, you can ask it, would it be okay if I ask questions? Who knows? Maybe the transgender or non-binary person will be open to it. It's the approach. It's how tactful you are with, you know, how you do it, but also know that there's a lot of free information out there on the internet that you can have access to. And try to put yourself in their shoes in the way you would ask questions, right? Like do research on the questions you want to ask before asking someone. That's what I would suggest.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Johanna, at the beginning, you talked about 3 different layers of advocacy, and that really caught my attention as far as you talked about individual advocacy, self-advocacy, and systems advocacy. How we've got so many educators and counselors on the line that clearly are looking at some of the systemic things that we can do as far as policy changes, but what more could we do to support self-advocacy? Because that's something that I see as a need across the board, but in particular with different communities for whom that can actually be a life or death situation.
I think I would start by just saying, like, reinforcing what is right and wrong, right? And knowing yourself well enough to speak up when there's injustices being, you know, at play. And also know that you see, as I'm speaking in my terms, as far as like self-advocacy would be like when I would come out and share my experience, or I would address things that I feel uncomfortable doing. But it's self-advocacy is, in going by the definitions, just going by, like, you know, your own, how to be the best advocate for yourself, right? And how to advocate on your own behalf. And what does that look like, right? I feel like when you're with the question that you're asking feels more like it's an individual advocacy because it's including another party. Is that correct? Sorry.
Well, mainly, like, how did you, well, could you share, would you be willing to share a point of reference for a time that you spoke up, and like what allowed you to have the courage in that moment, as opposed to another moment where you chose not to, and that was also its own self-advocacy? Because what I've come to know is that sometimes the advocacy is that it's not mine to say here, or it's not mine to say now, or I don't have the energy to say it to the people who have the ears but not the ability to hear it.
Well, as far as like my example that I'm giving with me coming out and addressing my identity, that's one. But there's also other needs, like as far as addressing what I want out of life, or what I want from work, what I think is fair pay, what is not, all of that. But there's also moments that I would say as allies, it would be important never to really speak on someone else's experience. I think that's very key, is to stay your lane and not talk about someone else's experience, or try your best not to give insight on. I know I touch base basically on like my experience with my friend, but I just found that one to be extremely important because it was very applicable to the situation. But it's tricky. I would say like there's moments where I felt that I don't need to share certain information. And one of the examples that I would say in the past that I didn't feel I needed to do was, I don't owe people, I don't owe them anything. I don't owe them, like, they don't need to know my identity. So there's people with trans experiences that want to live life stealth. And I think that's great for them if that's what they want. And I also validate that experience because I lived it and experienced it. And I want to be fair to myself and know that they don't need to know. That's information that I'm deciding to give to them. And it's up to me. I'm in control of my own narrative, my own experience, and I get to decide that. But I'm not quite sure if that answered your question.
It helped a lot. Thank you.
I have a question for Bridget.
Yes, sure.
Transgenderschool.org. When is that going live? And is it to educate people about transgender people?
Yes. So it's my daughter Jackie and I, it's a whole business. We're starting a whole business called Transgender School. We're hoping Johanna will join us as a speaker when she can. And we're going to bring in lots of people to be part of it. We're going to be offering online digital courses. We're going to share our family's experience and our recommendations. It's just not ready yet. So I'm announcing pre-launch, but we're going to be launching within the coming months. So please continue to look for that. I have the website for sure. It's transgenderschool.org, but it's with the web designers now, and we're really taking time and care. And Jackie and I are working closely together to design the content and the site and our social media sites to make sure that everything is as inclusive and positive as possible, and that we want to reach transgender people who want to be in a sport community. We want to reach family members, educators, right, business owners who want to have inclusive workplaces. So it's going to be massive, but we're just not launched yet. But I just want, since you're all here, I know that you will be supporters. So please be on the lookout. And I did put everyone who was invited here on our newsletter list, because the next newsletter will have the YouTube recording of this event. So if you don't want to be on our newsletter after and you want to unsubscribe, of course you always can, but I really want you to have this recording, which will be very edited, to share with other people in your life. Our goal is to spread this message far and wide, as you all know. So please help us do that. We'll be doing lots of free work and free content, as well as some courses that will be something that universities, schools, and businesses can purchase, to support the business and to get the word out in a much broader audience.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I think we got to everything. Please reach out to me if you had any questions that weren't answered. I think I'm gonna take Johanna out to get something to eat, because this is for both of us, doing this kind of thing. As she said, I think the term is emotional labor. It takes a lot out of all of us who are in the community and have dear loved ones in the community to talk about it all. And I thank you for making it as such a safe and warm space for us to do that, bringing great questions and comments. And please stay tuned for more. Please look for Transgender School on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and our website when it's ready, which will hopefully be in the next month or so. And please reach out if you have any other questions that weren't answered. I thank you so much. Everybody's writing thank you and goodbye in the chat, which is great. So thank you, and have a beautiful day and rest of the week. And we send you so much gratitude and appreciation for being here and sharing this experience with us. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you
again for joining.
Thank you.